special portion of the symposium, the Fern Delamere Memorial Lecture. We're very pleased to have Dr. Erin Sharpe joining us from Brock University to deliver this keynote address. The lecture is graciously supported by the Pullman Fund and the Dean's Office. So at this point, I'd like to invite Leanne Ferries to say a few words on behalf of the Dean's Office.
Great, thank you. Yes, I am acting as Dean today, so unfortunately Paul is away in Vancouver on an event. So I'm happy to be here representing the Dean and the faculty office, so thank you for that. So welcome everyone to this great event. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all the grad students. I understand there are probably 5 other universities represented here today besides Waterloo, so that's great that you've joined us. Welcome to our undergrad students that are joining us, faculty members from near and far, as well as our community guests to this great calming lecture. It's part of the 26th anniversary of the GARLS Symposium, so time certainly flies, so congratulations. And in particular, on behalf of the Faculty of Applied Health Sciences, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Erin Sharpe from Brock University, so thank you for joining us today. Our faculty is proud of our record of setting a gold standard in academic and research leadership that protects and promotes health and well-being. And we are committed to improving the quality of life of individuals in our communities and our populations through innovative education and research activities. We take our role seriously as leaders in the development of strategies that prevent disease and injury, that protect and promote healthy living, optimize physical ability, and improve health and well-being across the life course. If you're interested in learning more about the exciting work that's happening in the Faculty of Applied Health Sciences, we have our impact report, and I have a couple of copies with me today, free, as well as our News to You magazine, lots of amazing profiles, and it gives you a sense of the reach of our work that's happening. I also want to especially acknowledge the Department of Rec and Leisure Studies, and I'm very fortunate to be a faculty member in that department, so it's a great place to be. We want to acknowledge your well-recognized work that promotes health and well-being through academics, research, knowledge mobilization, and translation. And for the 3rd year in a row, the Department of Rec and Leisure Studies has been ranked as the best in Canada. And remember the QS rankings. So best schools in the world for subjects related to hospitality and leisure management. So congratulations. We're very proud, and it's great to be a part of this amazing department. This accomplishment is all the more notable considering the uniqueness of our department. You would have heard a variety of diverse research interests today reflected in the program and the students' presentations and poster presentations. Today's program is a vibrant showcase of the breadth and strength and impact of the department's work, ranging from exploring strategies and challenges of community-based participatory research to prenatal and postnatal leisure to spirituality and nature-based recreation. So the scope of the approaches, the interventions, and communities of interest is very impressive. So great to see that reflected in today's program. In AHS, Applied Health Sciences, we feel it's not only important to have strong researchers, but also to mentor the coming generations of colleagues. And one fine example of that commitment is through events such as this today. Sharing what we do is equally important, and today we do so through our Hallman Lecture series. Dr. Sharpe will be presenting our Hallman Lecture today, one of the tangible ways that our faculty demonstrates our commitment to promoting health and well-being. The series of lectures are made possible through a generous and visionary philanthropist in our community, whom I would like to briefly tell you a little bit about at this time. So Lyle S. Hallman, he was a developer, a contractor, and noted philanthropist in our area, Kitchener-Waterloo. He was the recipient of many awards, including the Order of Canada, as well as an honorary doctorate from our university. Generous donations made by Lyle with his wife Wendy to the Faculty of Applied Health Sciences created a number of endowments to to expand and sustain the health promotion activities within our faculty. The endowments have had a significant impact on the health and well-being of our community through research activities and the spread of knowledge related to health promotion, and through many additional outlets, including a session like today. To everyone who worked to make this day possible, thank you. Thank you for your commitment to enriching the applied health sciences community. Like you, I'm looking forward to the insights that our keynote speaker, Dr. Sharpe, will share with us today as we continue to explore health and well-being through the lens of recreation and leisure studies. I will now turn the podium over to Brooke Gibbons, who will formally introduce our speaker. Brooke. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 2019 Fern Delamere Memorial Lecture. My name is Brooke Gibbons, and I'm pleased to be introducing our keynote speaker. Since 2015, the University of Waterloo Graduate Association of Recreation and Leisure Studies has honored former PhD graduate Fern Delamere with a memorial lecture at the annual Research Symposium. Fern graduated from University of Waterloo with her PhD in 2004. She was tragically killed in an automobile accident in December of 2013. The memorial lecture is Waterloo's contribution to remembering Fern. So the Fern Delamere Memorial Lecture has been delivered by esteemed alumni and some of the best researchers in the field of recreation and leisure studies. This year, we are pleased to have Dr. Erin Sharpe from Brock University to deliver the lecture. Erin is the current chair and associate professor in the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies at Brock, her academic home since 2001. She was also my prof when I did my undergrad at Brock, so that's why I'm standing here saying this to you. And she was one of my letters of recommendation for getting to this program, so thank you. She completed her PhD at Indiana University, her MA at the University of Georgia, and her bachelor's degree at McMaster University. Outside of her work at Brock, Erin is a rower, a sailing school organizer, a bike swap planner, and advocate for all things playful. Erin's research investigates the social, cultural, and political context of community leisure, broadly defined. Past projects have focused on community festivals and events, young people's play and recreation, neighborhood policy and governance, nonprofit organizations, and sport for development. So, a lot. Today, her lecture explores the historical, social, political, and ideological terrain for young people at play and its implications for young people. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Erin Sharpe. This is just like my class, all the front seats. Thank you very much for having me. I really, really appreciate being the Fern Delamere invited keynote. I knew Fern had the pleasure of enjoying her company a number of different times at different conferences, and she is very deserving of this honor. And as somebody who I think today, some of the things I talk about have a Fern-esque quality to them. She's always a fighter for young people and people who are marginalized. And play was also sort of the center of the work that she did too. So I really appreciate that I was invited to be that speaker. Also, thank you to the Lyle Holloman Fund and the faculty for sponsoring this. And also a really big thank you to the students who organized the conference, especially Dan and Laura. It's really special that it's a student-organized day, I think. That really should be acknowledged because it's a lot of students' time putting this together. So congratulations to everybody for putting on such a great day. I've enjoyed it thoroughly already. It's been really fun to see folks who have been part of my at least 16 or 17 years in academics. Some of my current colleagues are here, some former students, and folks who continue to inspire me in the work that I continue to do. So, thank you, everybody. I guess when I might have been tired when I wrote that description for what I was going to do in my talk today, because I think that was a tall order. and I don't think I'm going to follow through on it. Instead, I'm using the talk to take advantage of the opportunity for me to do a little bit more thinking around a paper that I've been working on for a long time. Corey can tell you, he probably saw it come to Leisure Studies a long time ago, and he sent it back with some keep working on it kind of comments, and so I have been. I've been working with a couple of colleagues on it. And it's within this area of children's playful geographies. This isn't an area that I've always been in, but I think it's an area that I'm going to be in for a little while. It's something that I'm already really enjoying. I think there's a lot of room to explore in this area, and so these are some of the different aspects that I see falling within this realm of children's playful geographies. Have any of you seen this picture before? This is a picture comparing kids' roaming ranges, the ranges that they're allowed to go play by themselves in different generations. So you can see the big one is the great-grandfather, the small one down to like a little teeny tiny circle for kids today. So I'm interested in things like that, things like the changing geographies of children's play. I'm also interested in this relationship that people have with spaces and how space and identity are co-produced, as well as children's experiences. So the next thing I want to do this summer is some more really phenomenological work, really looking at how children move through their environments and what that experience is like, because I think sometimes we lose a little bit of the perspective of children's experiences, and their playful experiences, and their experiences being mobile, and so I think that's an important thing to keep in the conversation. And spatial politics sort of fits in with all of that as well. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is this paper that I've been working on for quite a while with a couple of really important colleagues, Brett Lashley being one of them, Kathy Van Ingen being another. And this paper is really about a project that we've been working on for a little while around this relationship between children's lives at leisure, young people's lives at leisure, and the spaces that they live in. And so I think what I'll just do is tell you a little bit about what we wrote. And so 6,000 words. Are y'all ready for 6,000 words? I think I still will be able to get under the time, but for me it's a chance to just sort of work my way through these ideas, and so I just appreciate that I have the chance to do it. Here's what we have in our working title. We used to have this place where we go play, leisure, young people, and neighborhood improvement initiatives. So from 2014 to 2016, we invited young people who lived in 2 neighborhoods in the Niagara region of Ontario to participate in a project to explore their experiences of living in neighborhoods identified by local government as problematic and targeted for interventions. We were interested in how the recent interest in neighborhoods, including neighborhood-based poverty and inequality, and neighborhood-based policy interventions were affecting young people's lives, particularly their involvement in sport and leisure. For young people who have often struggled to be able to use public spaces for the purposes of play and leisure, neighborhood improvement initiatives introduce both the possibility of new opportunities, but also the possibility of new limitations. This is because the bodies of young people in public space have long occupied an ambivalent place in the public imagination. Constructed as a polluting presence, the unsupervised presence of young people is considered a potential threat to public order and cause for anxiety. And so we wanted to see how young bodies, especially young bodies while at play, were being imagined in the context of improvement. To what extent did the neighborhood initiatives position young people as beneficiaries or as targets of change, the problem to be addressed? And so in this presentation, I discussed the logics of neighborhood improvement initiatives and their impact for the young people who lived in the neighborhoods and used the neighborhood spaces for play and leisure. So we're drawing from 2 years of data generated with young residents in 2 neighborhoods in Niagara that had been identified as quote-unquote in need of attention in a regional strategy for poverty reduction. We employed a range of data collection techniques, including document review, semi-structured and goal on walking tour interviews, neighborhood mapping, observations, and digital storytelling. So in what follows, I'll elaborate on the project of neighborhood improvement enacted in these neighborhoods and how young people were constructed in these projects. In the presentation, I'll present a movement through our two city neighborhoods as remembered chronologically by young participants as spaces of leisure and sport while growing up. And so this narrative approach allows the development of a thematic analysis of the perceptions of how bad places were transformed into better or good ones, and also concomitant effects on the ways young people themselves were positioned as bodies in improved neighborhood spaces. And through this, I'll draw attention to how young people negotiated discursively and spatially life in an improving neighborhood. And I may not close the paper with a discussion of the implications. The paper gets a little mushy at the end, and that's one area that maybe I'll leave it to everybody's imagination. But I do want to think about young people's, what we can think about and what we can take away about young people's rights to visibility and mobility in their leisure and their lives. So just some background on neighborhood improvement initiatives. It's something that I need to kind of move past, but I've really been interested in for a long time. We've always had concerns about quote-unquote problem neighborhoods, but issues of neighborhoods re-entered mainstream conversation in the 2000s. I think sparked in part by developments in GIS mapping, which kind of allowed us to look at neighborhoods in a little bit of a different way than we had before. We started to see a neighborhood-based policy approach that was first grounded in a policy of helping neighborhoods of deprivation catch up so that no one's going to be left behind. Soon the neighborhood renewal agenda shifted to economic regeneration, transforming neighborhoods toward greater economic and social self-sufficiency through initiatives that were about transforming or catalyzing neighborhoods, skill building, economic incubators, entrepreneurship, and so on. In a neoliberal context, these were lauded as innovative, economically responsible, and locally responsive. And so the next decade was marked by a widespread adoption of neighborhood-based social policy approaches across Western Europe and North America, underpinning in some places national policy strategies for poverty reduction or youth development, and in some places metropolitan policy strategies in places like Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Philadelphia, Toronto as well. And so neighborhood-based policy approaches transferred into new contexts so rapidly and widely that it was referred to as a policy of motion. A term used to describe policy that develops and quickly disseminates transnationally through such knowledge transfer channels as professional conferences and international consultation. And so by the mid-2000s, neighborhood-based policy agendas began to stress the importance of addressing antisocial behavior and crime as a prerequisite for regeneration. And the language of policy drew heavily on the broken windows thesis, an ideology that, although debunked, has been highly influential in the urban policy realm, with a long history of shaping strategies in fields like policing and, more recently, urban renewal and regeneration. So the fundamental assumption of the broken windows thesis is that cues of disorder lead to economic decline. Wilson and Kelling explain that the visual cues are read as a precursor to decline. They're thought to attract criminal offenders who assume from these cues that residents are indifferent to what goes on in the neighborhood. Thus, in the logic of neighborhood regeneration, the corollary is true. A removal of cues of disorder lead to neighborhood economic regeneration. Government and local authorities began to stress the importance of neighborhood order, disorder, safety, and cleanliness in neighborhood initiatives. And this included removing highly visible signs of what people regard as disorderly and disreputable behavior in their communities, such as junk and trash in vacant lots, boarded up buildings, abandoned cars, and teenagers congregating on street corners. Yet the association between certain physical and social cues of neighborhood order is not natural or unambiguous in meaning, but is really based on a set of normative rules that are the result of specific cultural, social, and historical processes. Sampson and Raudenbush found that people read visual cues in racialized and poorer neighborhoods more problematically than the same cues in neighborhoods that are predominantly white and middle class. Further, certain cues are read more problematically among residents who are more deeply invested in place and have neighborhood trust. Researchers also found a relationship between respondents' self-identified racialized identity and ratings of disorder. Arguably, neighborhood disorders are constructed along the lines of an often middle-class cultural narrative and sensibility that establishes and reinforces conventions of desirability and undesirability. So for young people, the focus on neighborhood improvement in terms of order and cleanliness is troubling. On one hand, the presence of children at play, young ones, is a desirable feature of neighborhood life, and the playful sounds of children a positive feature of the ideal urban soundscape. Scholars have drawn critical attention to children's geographies as idealized natural terrain in which children are romantically constructed as angelic subjects of adult authority and control. At the same time, young people have been constituted as folk devils in various forms: criminals, drug users, gang members, student radicals, football hooligans, welfare mothers, among others. Whereas adults treat younger children as innocent, they treat older children as unengaging and frightfully undisciplined. And the violations of public etiquette that adults find amusing when committed by younger children are treated as dangerous moral failings when the transgressor is a few years older. In other words, as children grow older, louder, and more raucous, the sweet sounds of childhood are reconstituted as disorder, pollution, and noise. The construction of young people as threats to the moral order, the adult moral order, has fostered a consensus that young people do not belong in public space, and in turn has fostered a range of actions designed to remove young people from public space, delimit their geographies, and enforce their invisibility. Hancock has noted that efforts to clean up neighborhoods includes putting young bodies in their place, off the streets and into indoor adult supervised spaces. A consequence of neighborhood improvement initiatives has been the further criminalization of young people in public space. It's legitimized tighter controls over young people's movements through various law and order measures like curfews, trespass laws, and surveillance. Do you know that there are many places who grew up with the curfew law? There are many places that yeah, and are adding them in. What was the time?
Oh, probably like 10 o'clock.
Although young people are certainly targets of regulation, it's also clear that young people are agents in processes of placemaking and socio-spatial identity construction. And there's a vibrant area of research that examines the ways that young people assert their rights to occupy and use public space for their own purposes. Young people regularly challenge the normative construction of the street as adult space and the positioning of themselves as out of place. And these tactical acts are important because the repeated use of public space by young people disrupts the spatial hegemony of public space as adult space. And in so doing, young people are active in the processes of placemaking and also identity making. I included this because this is something that I didn't actually find that long ago, but it really talks about this shift towards kind of fixing the lives of young people and bringing young people into institutionalized spaces. And so Rasmussen talks about this as the institutionalized triangle, where more and more time of children are spent in these three spaces. So she talks about them as spaces for children, spaces that are designed by adults for the purposes of, and children are quite supervised. She also, though, talks about children's places where young people find and attribute meaning through their use in those places. And she really explores these lines of connection as areas of possibility. It's not something I'm getting into in this paper, but I am really interested in that idea of children moving and really how that kind of opens up some, just some ways of being and ways of thinking about how children can really be placemakers. So a little bit about this context. Niagara region has a population of about 500,000. If you don't know, it's an area that's had a lot of economic transition with manufacturing and has been looking for other ways to manage the growing demand on limited economic resources. So, like many places, it is interested in testing out alternative approaches to social welfare provision. The region completed a neighborhood mapping exercise. It assessed every neighborhood using some of those standard neighborhood deprivation measures, family income, education levels. Those are all very contested. We can talk about that if we wanted. And then the neighborhoods, two of the neighborhoods that were chosen were two of the ones for our study. We're naming them Red Crest and Rosetown. Something that's important to note is Red Crescent and Rosetown are quite highly racialized neighborhoods compared to the rest of the region. 32% of residents of Red Crescent and 22% of residents of Rosetown on census data claim ethnic origins outside of North America. The Niagara region itself is over 90% white Caucasian. And then in some areas, the informal estimates are about 70%. Some areas in the neighborhood. So in Niagara, what was started was a program called the Niagara Prosperity Initiative. And that was something developed by the region and also kind of bought into by other big local funders to direct financial resources to these areas identified as quote-unquote stress. What is here is the funding that's been distributed in these years with the different types of programs that it's been distributed to. So the highest percentage of funding was going to programs around children and youth, with community development being close behind. At the time that we began our study, these neighborhood improvement initiatives have been operating for about 5 years in one of our neighborhoods, Red Crest, and Rosetown for about 2. So they were already happening when we joined in, but during our time of active data collection, we made repeated visits to the neighborhoods. We held over 40-70 structured interviews with young people. We had 3 research assistants helping us and working with us, which was great because they were younger. They really related a lot. They related better as kids than I did. Don't know why, but they did. And many of the tours were, as I mentioned before, walking tours, traveling around the neighborhood. And then a final phase was the digital storytelling workshop. And so I have one that I will show. We had 24 young residents participate in the digital storytelling, which is where we created 3 to 5 minute videos about different things, their life in sport, their experiences in the neighborhood, and some were about what they chose to make them about. So I'll first talk about the discourse of neighborhood improvement, and then I'll talk about how young people negotiated the changes. Okay, these are a bit, they didn't copy so well. These are 3 of the different maps that young people made. So first, I'll give you a bit of a sequence or timeline of perspectives as young people articulated key moments of living out their lives in their changing neighborhood. It'll center on a discussion of young people's ongoing negotiations of youthful subjectivities, both as desired and imposed, and views of dilemmas regarding how to position their bodies in the spaces of the neighborhood as they grew up and grew older. We're really interested in understanding or making sense of the changing lives and changing places. And so I'll begin the story with the childhood memories shared through young residents' digital stories, and then progress through accounts of perceived neighborhoods transformations. In this progression, I'm really paying attention to the ways that young people perceive their neighborhood have changed, and also the ways that their own bodies and behaviors were transformed too. So I'm not sure if you can see, but on every map here, there's something labeled the court. And that was one of the spaces in the neighborhoods that was really central to the lives of young people. And so our analysis really will begin and kind of end with the court. First thing I want to show you then is a digital story that one of the young participants made about the court. His name is Tyrell. And Dan, I'm crossing my fingers to see as well. Oh, no, I didn't do it. All right. Maybe I have to do it this way.
Press the arrow.
Okay. Press the arrow.
Can you find the map and bring it to the arrow?
Is your name shared?
Right in the middle.
Might not show on the monitor.
Talk amongst yourselves.
There you go.
It's not working.
In the summer, we would play for hours. The court was right beside my house, so I could run home or hop the fence into my backyard and get a drink of water. My dad was a maintenance man. He would clean up the court and fix anything when it got broken. He chose to do it because he wanted the kids in the complex to have a place to play that was close. He didn't want anyone to get bullied, especially by people from other complexes. One day, people started pulling the nets down, breaking the rims, and pulling the poles out of the ground. Then the balls would go missing because people would steal them. People would break in at night and do drugs in the court when everyone was sleeping. The court was a waste of time because it was keep on getting wrecked and people were disrespecting it. So, Niagara Housing tore down the court. After the teenager got angry because they didn't have a place to chill out or hang out anymore. The court was painted over with hopscotch and snakes and ladder games. They put in benches that I really like because they are really comfortable. I can chill there with my friends and always talk. When I was at the basketball court, I remember playing there with my brother. He would always beat me at basketball, even though there was trouble at night. During the day, the basketball court was there where little kids and big kids would always have fun and play together and not be rude to each other.
They all like the Star Wars. So Tyrell's narrative takes on almost a fairy tale style. There once, he starts it off, instead of once upon a time, as he describes an earlier idealized time. Indeed, across their recollections, the court conjured strong memories of significant moments of growing up. Muhammad explained to us that from grade 5 until through high school, the court was the place where he spent most of his time. It shaped me, I would say, he said. For Selit, talking about the court also evoked powerfully positive memories of childhood, especially learning from and trying to keep up with the older boys. All were skilled ball players, and the court was the place to go in the city for high-quality pickup basketball. We heard the story about when I was growing up, I was just watching my brother play and all his friends because they used to play pickup. There was mass games, everyone used to go there. So at the court, I'd just sit on the bench and watch. There's a lot I could dunk, and I'd think, man, that's going to be me. So I'd say the court was for sure the place where I go, like memory lane. Suzanne described the court as a site that was the arena of the neighborhood, a place where really interesting stuff goes down. Khalid said the court was important to him as a site of social and physical activities because we play so much sports there. My best friend Josh, that's where I met him because we were playing hockey and I played, so we all just play together. The open spaces were the places where life happened for young people, where they learned in an active community, friendship, cooperation, and conflict management. As Tyrell explained in his story, even though his neighborhood was a troubled place, it was a friendly place that built community, and the court was a safe place for those kids to play where they wouldn't get picked on, like they sometimes did when they played in other neighborhoods. The court was also a place that young people ran themselves, making their own arrangements for how to use and share the space without adult intervention or supervision. Reem remembered that back in her days as a kid, the older kids shared the court with the younger kids, half and half, young kids playing on one side, the big kids playing on the other half. And when we remarked on that, she just said, well, it's a big court, why not share? Yet it was the wider sharing of the court that brought about its troubles and prompted its transformation into something else. As Tyrell pointed out, the use of the court shifted later in the evening when the older youth then occupied it. He described it then as a space that was used by gangsters who caused trouble in the neighborhood. Among residents, gangsters were constructed as young people who were not residents of the neighborhood, but instead were invaders, people who lived elsewhere but came to the neighborhood to use its spaces for drug use and sales, drinking, vandalism, fighting, and so on. And this spatial invasion was upsetting for residents who felt that they had lost control of their neighborhood spaces to these undesirable outsiders. Like Terrell, Chelsea was also frustrated as her neighborhood was being ruined by these invaders. And she and her mom, who sat in on the interview, explained that these older teenage invaders were able to take over the court because the neighborhood was thought of as a ghetto. Its problems were thus ignored by city officials. As she said, they got blamed for all the problems. Collins and Kurtz argued that a discourse of crime as perpetuated by dangerous outsiders and the deployment of disease metaphors in relation to youth crime is reflective of a fear of the youthful other, the young person from another race, class, or place. Representations of youth crime as an invasive phenomenon serves at least two purposes. One, it allows communities to absolve themselves of responsibility for delinquency by claiming it comes from somewhere else. It also justifies measures of youth control. And so we can see this shifting of responsibility for neighborhood problems in the commentary of Chelsea and her mom, where it operates as a distancing strategy from a highly stigmatized ghetto identity, as well as in calls among residents for something to be done to improve the space. So things were done in neighborhoods. One of the first things that was done was to make changes to the courts. In one neighborhood, the court remained intact, but closed caption TV cameras were installed, and a private security company was hired to patrol the neighborhood and also lock up the court at night. I'm not sure if you could see in Tyrell's video, the court was dismantled. He showed the pictures of the court having been transformed with hopscotch drawings on the asphalt. Prior to that, there was a fence, basketball poles, and nets. They were all removed. And that dismantling was viewed with ambivalence, both feelings of relief at the removal of gangsters, as well as feelings of loss at no longer having a meaningful community space. As Tyrell explained, he was kind of happy that it was being taken down because, as he said, it was a waste of time fixing it. It's just going to be disrespected. What's the point of even having one? Along with changes to the court, another major change was the establishment of youth centers in the neighborhoods and accompanying organized sport and recreation programming. Significant funds were dedicated to this. Local youth organizations were contracted to run daily programs after school and in the evenings, and staff these programs as leaders. Among residents, the youth centers were tied to that project of neighborhood improvement and had contributed to its betterment. Michaela, for example, explained that her neighborhood had a reputation. It used to not be the greatest place, but the community house and stuff like that has actually made it better. Like what they do with the kids. The kids used to be bad. Honestly, I would say they were really bad, but now they all have a place to go and hang out. They don't have to go on the street and do bad stuff. They have a place to go and hang out. The organized program for the young people spilled out from the youth center as well and transformed the other open spaces of the neighborhood. They were made a lot more childish, for sure. You know, they were hopscotch games aren't the same as basketball courts. Movies were shown. They were usually movies like Frozen and other activities that were really designed for younger children. Michaela talked about that, how they would find out about these different activities. Flyers would be bought around, and like everybody basically in the community goes because they hand out flyers to let everybody know what day it's going to be and where. Michaela's comments echo the assumed notion of the street as a dangerous problem space for young people. Against this, Michaela positions the youth center as a solution to that problematic presence of young people on the street. And she's referring to referencing a common construction of young people as innocents susceptible to bad influences in their environment and in need of protection from making bad choices as a result. This youth construct presents a common theme that's justified the control and containment of young bodies at play in a variety of forms. Organized programming is one such form. It offers a dual solution. First, it changes the environment and removes bad influences, along with bringing in adult supervision. In youth centers, young people are being watched, regulated, corrected, and transformed toward respectable adulthood. Malone describes this as a not seen and not heard strategy of youth management, where the community removes the problem by creating a space for young people where they can conduct their own activities without interfering with legitimate users of public space. But it does also cut young people off from the positive aspects of being in public space, enjoying the social integration and freedom of movement that provides. So we were interested, though, in also hearing and seeing how young people negotiated life and leisure in this changing neighborhood. In what ways did the logics of improvement impose on their bodies and behaviors? Certainly it removed access to some spaces and encouraged their containment in indoor supervised spaces, with their young bodies in the neighborhood coming to resemble the institutionalized childhood that is so apparent in middle-class children's lives. Or at least that was the logic of the improvement initiative. However, in this context, certainly young residents continued to assert their freedom to move through the neighborhood on their own terms. Some of the people we talked to never or rarely visited the youth center. Michaela, for example, although she viewed it favorably, preferred instead to go to the gym or spend time at home. She was 16, and the youth center was a space that her younger sister used, so she definitely wasn't going to go there. So this is important to acknowledge, as the use of spaces and places is tied to age, and entering and departing spaces is one way that young people mark out their experiences of growing up. Growing up involves moving to new places. We heard lots of stories about visits to parks and playgrounds being from an earlier time. And entry into new spaces is one way that people move into older ages. The youth center itself was a space to which access was only permitted once kids were 13. So although it was an institutional space, it held value as a marker of reaching teenagehood. And many young people certainly used it that way, as going to the teen center was one way to get out from under their parents' watchful eye and spend more time hanging out with friends. We heard this, or we saw this definitely more among the girls, especially girls who were in Muslim families. For them, the youth center was the center of their social lives. For others, it was one of a number of leisurely options or places to visit in their free time. Even for Chris, who was a dedicated attendee at the youth center, it was only part of his evening routine. For him and his friends, the street remained a place of meaning, and his freedom to move through the neighborhood was an important signifier of his growing maturity and independence. So he told us about his routine. He said, well, first I'm at Latoya's, and if I don't want to be at home because I don't want to be at home, and she has food and Wi-Fi, and then we go to Tim Hortons. We're there every night mostly. Like last week, we went every night after the community house, even on the weekends, 7 days a week. So the program ends at 8:15, and then you go to Tim Hortons? Yeah, because we have pretty reasonable curfews, like 9:30, 10. So after the community house, we can just go chill until we have to go in. Anna has strict curfew of 8:15, so after the community house is done, she has to be inside. She can't ask to come out longer. I don't know why. But me and Latoya will just go about our day, night, evening, whatever you want to call it. So indeed, as the neighborhood was changing, so were the young people. On their maps, they drew places that they used to go that offered great childhood memories. And so similar to what Gray and Manning have reported, young people in our city constructed their, and they also chose to stop going to some places as a way to hand them over to the next generation. This idea of spatial self-regulation was one way that they constructed, another way that they constructed a grown-up identity. In the sense that knowing what is right and wrong in public spaces allows them to position themselves closer to adult than child. For young residents, self-regulation was a part of maturing and also role modeling. So some of them talked about not going to the court because now it's a place for little kids. Latoya explained that when she no longer visited the play areas, she said, well, let them have their turn. Hussein made sure that whenever he wanted to smoke marijuana, he left the neighborhood to do so. And as he said, part of the reason why I go outside the community, so the kids wouldn't see me doing that and just be like, oh, he's doing that. Because I feel that's something. I thought it was a bit of an influence because I would just see everyone here and there would be just kids out that they grew up with. And you see them smoking. In addition, at least in Red Crest, some young people continue to use the court, which forced them to encounter and make sense of its surveillance. We asked Marwan, who used the court in Red Crest, about his perspectives on the security of the neighborhood and the court. When we asked him about the purpose of the court being locked up, he said, well, to be honest, I'm not sure. I don't know why they would lock up the court. They probably don't want people playing at night while other people are trying to sleep. Does it bother you? He was asked. It didn't bother me, although I did want to shoot around on like summer nights at like 10 or whatever. But I mean, I don't know. It's bothering me to see what the purpose was for locking the court. But then again, people usually sleep around that time, and I'm sure there would be like noise complaints for a specific timing. And that's why we're thinking, because it's just so sensitive to many houses, you probably hear it. Yeah, I hear it. I was out, let's say, around 12 or 1 with my brothers, and we were in front of the house playing basketball. And we shouldn't have been playing. It was 1 a.m. So Marwan's pretty ambivalent about the courts being locked up and the extra presence of surveillance, because it can be read as both an indicator of neighborhood safety and also danger. It's safety in the sense that this presence of surveillance provides security, but danger in that the presence of surveillance indicates the potential for problems. So young people kind of had to choose which positioning they preferred, and some preferred the protection positioning. It was useful for resisting the construction of the neighborhood as a still dangerous place. For example, Hanan talked about how she refers to the security presence when her friends question the safety of her neighborhood. She told us, my one friend Liam, he was like, oh, you live in Red Crest, that's like not safe. It's like a dangerous neighborhood and you're like going to get killed and stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. There's security every night, and every other night they check up on the neighborhood and they keep everything safe. In comparison to some of the young women, there was more reticence among some of the young men we talked to construct a neighborhood as a site of the invasion of gangsters, and of the young people who lived in the neighborhood as in need of protection. And this may be because in the logic of neighborhood improvement, theirs are the bodies that are marked out as the primary source of disorder. The surveillance efforts are in place precisely to keep an eye on bodies like theirs. In Marwan's response to our questions about security presence in the neighborhood, we can see how he avoids drawing on discourses that re-pathologize the court and the neighborhood as a dangerous place, or position the young people who use it as dangerous criminals. Instead, he works to find some other discursive space to make sense of the security presence, which he does to some extent by normalizing it as a sensible practice in any neighborhood. Of course, kids should be playing out late at night. And so his comments illustrate the complicated positioning of young bodies at play in the improved neighborhood, where the presence of surveillance constructs them both as devils, dangerous under control, and angels, innocent and needing protection. Both are problematic. Even being constructed as an angel in need of protection is troubling because it encourages the thinking of young people as vulnerable and incompetent, and which through repeated performances congeals to facilitate the production of public space as adult space, where unaccompanied youngsters do not belong. So that discourse diminishes the agency of young people and puts them in a position of grateful recipient while also celebrating the generosity of the benevolent helper. So we asked a lot of the young people about what their neighborhood was like now. And we heard a lot about how they thought the neighborhood was better. So for example, Sarah said, it's just like a fun area where kids play. It's not dangerous or whatever. It's safe, it's nice. Young people's descriptions really work to normalize the neighborhood, which really highlights the burden of living with the stigmatized ghetto label. Ghetto is really a pejorative term about space that also constructs residents themselves as ghetto. It illustrates the co-construction of spatial and social identities. So they invested in times in the improvement projects, in part to shake off the ghetto label affixed to them. Their desire of improvement efforts was to reconstruct the neighborhood not as different or a problem, but as normal, regular, just like everywhere else. So really they were negotiating multiple identities. They were negotiating for multiple mobilities, both spatial mobilities, but also socioeconomic, right? They're sort of aspiring to pull themselves away from a ghetto identity, which sort of labels them in a particular social class, and their movements through the space interacted with that. There's more I could say, but I won't. I'll leave us all to ponder the implications of it. But I do look forward to your questions. Again, these are ideas that I'm still working through, so I'd love to get some feedback from you. And